Welcome to the Rimworld mod rundown. We'll be taking a quick look at what you can expect to see from Vanilla Races Expanded Starjack. For starters, you'll need to own both the Biotech and Odyssey DLC, as well as the additional workshop content, Vanilla Expanded Framework, and Harmony. I'm taking a quick break from working on the Odyssey DLC rundown to cover the VE team's take on Starjacks. This isn't a super expansive race mod, something like your Sanguiphage or Android. It's more of a focused overhaul to the Xenotype to make it a little bit more interesting to interact with, very akin to what happened to Wasters or Genies. For those that haven't made use of Starjacks yet, I should probably cover what they actually do in base game. They have good temperature tolerances, a natural resistance to the vacuum effect that occurs in space, a preference for living indoors over outdoors, poor melee damage and poor melee skill, awful mining, plants and animals, but a solid proficiency with construction. They're pretty flat, with the majority you encounter ending up playing like a ranged only baseliner that happens to be passionate about construction. There isn't really much more to it than that. There's no fancy abilities, no horrific penalties, the only thing you're really going to notice is the good and the bad skills. Now they've got quite a bit more going on, so first of all let's go over what hasn't changed. They're still cold tolerant, still heat tolerant, they still have both weak melee damage and poor skill to go with it. They have awful animals and plants, but not mining anymore. Thank God. The awful mining gene on them made zero sense to me when the orbital layer is brimming with asteroids and old mining operations. They still like to stay indoors and have the same cosmetics. No hair, facial ridges and sheer white skin. Although now they have
What is it?
Have a tail.
Huh?
I'm not quite sure what I was expecting for the VE's take on a Starjack, but it certainly wasn't giving them a tail. As standard, this is granting them a bonus to manipulation, like the smooth tail gene from base game, although it's more impactful on metabolic efficiency as, whilst in space, this grants the ability to perform a very long range leap. Not only is the range on this jump better than something like a dedicated jump pack utility, the cooldown is super short too, taking less than an hour to be ready again. Just be aware that to make good use of this outside of combat scenarios, you need to get pretty micromanagement heavy with your Starjacks. It can save them a lot of travel time, but you need to keep an eye on them pretty much constantly to make sure it's being used when available. They also now have access to the foam spray ability. Whilst fire, smoke and toxic gases aren't really too much of a threat in space due to the vacuum removing them near instantly, fires aboard a grav ship can be incredibly dangerous. Whilst you can always use the tried and true method of deconstruct the nearest wall, turning the indoors into outdoors so that the temperature stops rising, then just let the vacuum of space put it out, this allows you to instantly saturate a room with fire foam instead and save the hassle of doing that, as well as answering the question of if Starjacks spit or swallow. Next we have the entirely new genes added with this mod, starting with vacuum efficiency. If you ever wanted a real motivating factor to try and stay in space indefinitely, this is probably it. Whilst in space, global work speed is bumped up to 125%, with move speed being buffed to 115%. The flip side of this gene is, whilst you're on the planet's surface, global work speed is absolutely crushed to just 65%, and movement speed is lowered to 85%. Trying to get a fully self-sustained grav ship running is no easy task, as you'll typically need a bare minimum of batteries, multiple power sources, hydroponics for both your food and the extra biomass that you'll need to refine into chem fuel, with Starjacks always being absolutely god-awful with plants, so it's going to be tough. Of course, it's much easier if you can convince your colony that space cannibalism is the correct course of action.
Any questions?
Hey, put your hand down.
Cryostasis is an extremely useful gene, even if you don't want to use Starjacks yourself. Extracting this to use in your own xenogerms is pretty worthwhile. It costs no metabolic efficiency and provides immunity to hypothermia, with hypothermia itself being replaced by cryostasis that progresses through 4 stages of intensity. This effect does appear to stack faster than your standard hypothermia, in terms of how quickly a colonist will become downed, but there is no risk of frostbite or death, so it's pretty preferable. At the initial stage, this will lower movement and consciousness by 10%, as well as increasing the rate that tiredness accumulates to 125%. The colonist will then become drowsy, with the consciousness drop becoming more severe at -30%, as well as a 10% drop in manipulation and movement, and tiredness now increases at a rate of 150%. There is a very small upside to this in that hunger rate is slowed by 10%, so colonists entering cryostasis don't need quite as much food. Next, this effect hits the sleep stage, with a consciousness max of 10%, 200% tiredness rate, and hunger rate being lowered by a huge 65%. Finally, it'll progress to deep sleep. Consciousness max and tiredness remain unchanged, but the hunger rate offset drops by even more, reaching -98%. So now you only need to feed this colonist every 25 days or so. Thanks to how cryostasis works, it's possible to make use of it to get a colonist through a difficult addiction, with their demand for drugs or alcohol continuing to tick down whilst they hibernate, and absolutely no risk of a serious mental break due to their poor mood. It's a lot more cost effective than constantly sedating them, and much more humane than removing their legs. Vacuum resistant from base game has been replaced with vacuum impervious, which isn't quite immunity, but it's pretty damn close, gaining 96% resistance to the buildup of vacuum exposure, which is about equivalent to wearing a marine helmet and armour. So whilst exposure will slowly accumulate, Starjacks don't need to wear a suit and helmet all of the time. They can simply put on a sealed helmet occasionally to undo the buildup and return to whatever else they were wearing afterwards. That's assuming of course you don't yet have an oxygen pump somewhere on your gravship or orbital base. This also allows Starjacks to wear preferred apparel when starting with the gravship scenario, without immediately dying because they prioritise wearing a visage mask over a vac-suit helmet.
No! Oh, no!
Then we've got intense oxygen sensitivity. You get two other severities of this gene included with VE Starjack 2, at mild and extreme. So if you want to make your own xenotypes or go and find the gene packs in the world, they're an option to install too. This oxygen sensitivity can be negated by wearing clothing or armour that provides at least 80% vacuum resistance. The amount provided by the vacuum resistant or impervious gene does not count towards this. Think of it like wearing a reverse spacesuit. A colonist with this gene is trying to keep the oxygenated atmosphere on the outside rather than on the inside. Whilst exposed to an oxygen-rich environment, which in this case is specifically considered to be planet-side, the colonist suffers a range of debuffs. An oxygenated gravship is considered safe for the sake of this sensitivity, as the atmosphere can be controlled to sit at a comfortable level for all xenotypes aboard, so as long as colonists with this gene are in orbit, they're fine. Mild sensitivity will drop consciousness to 90%, breathing to 80% and lower mood by 3, so it isn't horrific for a +3 metabolic efficiency, although chances are if you're taking this gene for metabolic efficiency, you're going to want it to be as severe as possible. Intense sensitivity is what the Starjacks have, lowering consciousness to 80%, breathing to 60% and lowering mood by 8. Which is starting to get pretty dangerous, as that laboured breathing and consciousness is also having an impact on moving, on top of their vacuum efficiency gene, which will see a standard colonist moving at just 2.66 speed and performing general labour at 51% efficiency if they're planet-side without a suit. Extreme oxygen sensitivity gives a +5 to metabolic efficiency, at the cost of a drop to 70% consciousness, 20% breathing, -14 mood, and the deadly effect of hyperoxia buildup. This increases at a rate of 1% per second, which is fatal upon reaching 100%. Providing you either have access to sustainable orbital living, or you're willing to wear vac suits or armour on the planet's surface, you can negate these effects all the time. Oxygen sensitivity isn't that bad, it just needs to be planned around. Gravship Affinity is the final xenogene, which only costs complexity as it's pretty niche in its effect. It increases piloting ability to 125%, which is taken into consideration before intellectual skill and stat offsets are applied, but after the bonus that comes from having a pilot assistant implant. This means that even a lowly intellectual skill of 5, when combined with a gene and implant, is enough to hit above 100% piloting quality, making it very easy to have an entire crew that's capable of high quality gravship launches.
A little more power now.
I'm out of fuel.
Right for lineup.
Lost a wing.
Doing fine.
There goes the other one.
Okay, Topper. Call the ball.
Touching down.
Finally then, we have the new unique mechanic for Starjacks that was introduced with VE, astrogenes. These work entirely outside of metabolic efficiency and complexity, as well as being unobtainable through gene extraction. So they're basically a free boost to every Starjack, but they're only going to be active whilst they're in orbit. There is also a limit to what can randomly be generated for these genes too. They must be at least 2 or lower in terms of gene complexity and between -1 and -5 in metabolic efficiency. That means that you're always, or at least almost always, going to get something that offers a positive effect. Occasionally you may roll something that slightly clashes or comes with a downside to balance it back out, such as rolling the furry tail, which is technically a good gene, but it overrides the space jump tail, which is far more preferable. You could also get something like web phalanges, which allows you to move faster in water at the cost of 5% manipulation, but you aren't really going to be swimming in space. This leads to a little bit more randomness that can make or break certain recruits, as whilst you might find a Starjack that doesn't really have any great passions, outside of their always useful construction, they might have the jogger trait and the very fast runner gene, making them fantastic for hauling tasks and perfect at kiting enemies around the map. Just like a xenogene, astrogenes aren't passed along to children, so the preferred acquisition method of an army of Starjacks is most likely going to involve fighting the Traders Guild in space, as they have the highest occurrence of the xenotype at 25%. If you aren't a fan of this system because you find it makes Starjacks too unpredictable or too powerful, or if you want to push it even further and have all of the perks possible, there are settings in the mod options to change the amount of astrogenes Starjacks will generate, with a range of 0 to 5. And that's it, a nice easy rundown to get out whilst I continue to work on my Odyssey coverage. It's one of those expansions I could quite easily sink another 3 or 4 runs into before saying that I had a fully formed opinion around it. There's just so much to mess around with and try out, definitely now that the Starjack is more viable for pure orbital runs thanks to the VE team. It's taken what was originally a somewhat underwhelming xenotype, often harder to justify bringing along than a plain old baseliner, and making it something I actually want to inspect and consider when downed, rather than immediately writing them off upon seeing their xenotype icon. If you'd like to see what I'm working on and get insights into upcoming projects, it's all available to view on my Patreon page. The posts there are free to read, and if you'd like, you can support me in producing content like this for just £1 a month. It gets your name in the credits of these videos, and it does help me stay alive. Thanks for watching, folks. If you have any mods you would like to see a full breakdown for, or suggestions of mods you would like to see covered, feel free to leave them in the comments, I might get around to them. Just make sure they're updated to 1.6 first. I'll be back again soon with another Rimworld mod rundown. Wherever you are in the world, enjoy the rest of your morning, afternoon, or evening. Take care.